share screen. And you guys are good to go. We're recording as well.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining. My name is Venktesh Shukla, and founder of a seed stage VC fund called Monta Vista Capital in the Valley. The world around us is changing. And to make sense of all that, we at TIE have put together a series of conversations where we talk to folks who have the vantage point to help us make sense of all the changes and the opportunities that those changes enable. So we are fortunate to have an outstanding individual today to kick off this series. It's my honor and privilege to introduce our speaker today, Nagraj Kashyap. Nagraj is Corporate Vice President at Microsoft, where he founded and leads M12, the corporate venture arm of Microsoft. Nagraj has led investments in Livongo and CloudSimple, among many other successful ones. He also serves as a board member of the National Venture Capital Association. Prior to joining Microsoft in January 2016, Nagraj was Senior Vice President for Qualcomm Technologies, where he founded and oversaw Qualcomm's $1 billion strategic venture investment in about 140 different companies. He has been recognized as a leader in corporate venturing through GCV Powerlist Award from 2013, 14, 16, 17, 18, and 19. I don't know how he missed the 2015 one, but please help me welcome Nagraj. Nagraj?
Thank you, Venk. I really am privileged to be here. I see a number of folks on the call already. Thank you, Ty and Venk, for organizing this. It is a hard time for entrepreneurs, so I can completely understand what most of you are going through. Hang on one second. Sorry, living in San Diego has its pleasures, but we also have the U.S. Marines here, so we do hear a lot of that during the day. So yeah, I think this is a very critical time for the country, the startup economy, as Venk said. A lot of things are changing. I went through the 2009 timeframe when I was at Qualcomm leading the venture group, so I have some experience going through points in time when raising capital becomes harder. So I'll try to draw upon both my experience from the last downturn and what we are seeing today to help as much as I can. I will not have all the answers you need. That is sort of up to you and the decisions you make. I can only give advice. It's one person's advice and one data point. So please take it as that.
So guys, there are going to be a lot of participants and there are going to be a lot of questions. We will not be accommodate all the questions, but we'll try to do justice to as many of them as we can. So since I'm the moderator, I have the privilege of asking the first few questions. So here it goes. So Nagraj, if you could help us explain the difference between a traditional VC and a corporate VC. And within a corporate VC also, M12 is unlike most other corporate venture initiatives. If you could explain the two differences, please.
Yeah, happy to, Venk. I think there's corporate VCs in general are painted on a fairly broad brush. The corporate VC name can be tainted from people's association with corporate VC as being strategic VC. There's, again, as Venk said, many definitions of how corporate VCs operate. Some are strategic, some are financial, some are a mix of both. At the end of the day, it's up to the founders and the entrepreneurs to figure out what they're trying to do, what VC will help them, whether it's a financial VC or a CVC, and then appropriately seek capital. The way we talk about ourselves at M12, we've been around for 4 years, and it's the same philosophy which I built Qualcomm Ventures on, which is when we have our first meeting with the founder or entrepreneur, at that meeting, you're pitching to a financial VC. If the deal doesn't make sense to financial VC, it will not make sense to M12. That is really the first and foremost criteria we have, is to make money. We are set up as a fund that is not only measured, but incentivized on making returns, just like any other VC. Now, we do have other considerations we take into account if we believe that this is going to be a good investment for M12. I think Venk has questions on that, but some of it I will answer right now, which is, even if the investment we believe is one of the best ones we can make at M12, the question really is, can we help the company post-investment? So the way I explain to entrepreneurs is, pre-investment, I'm a financial VC. Post-investment, I turn into a strategic VC, in the sense of, I want to make sure we can leverage the resources of Microsoft to help companies post-investment. There are certain classes of companies we can help post-investment and certain classes we cannot. We are very selective in picking companies which are both going to be return high financial returns for us, but also that we can help, so that those founders can then go tell other founders and other VCs how helpful M12 was post-investment. To give you a quick example, our portfolio, which is now about 85 plus strong, has no B2C companies. It is not that there's no good B2C companies in the world. There's great B2C companies. However, there is almost nothing M12 can do post-investment for a B2C company. And so from our perspective, there is no point in taking on investment and putting money into a company where we cannot help post-investment. That's a very strong filter we use, and it is not a strategic filter. We turn it around. We say, it's not whether you as a founder or a company is strategic to us, it's whether Microsoft post-investment can be strategic to you. So that's, I'll stop there. I'll let Venk ask more questions.
Well, I think, so, in terms of investment, since you're only a B2B kind of investor, what kind of problems that a startup is solving that catches your attention? What are the reasons that you would invest in a startup?
Yeah, so again, going to the B2B world, which is very broad, I think there's great entrepreneurs in every segment of B2B. But let me give you another example. If a startup is selling to a SMB or a small medium business, generally speaking, we don't invest, not because that is not a good investment area. It's because the biggest points of leverage we have as M12 is to use Microsoft's go-to-market. Microsoft's go-to-market is 50,000 plus enterprise sellers. Those enterprise sellers do not sell into chains like a spa. If you're doing a CRM for a spa company, that is not something that we can help you post-investment with from an enterprise go-to-market perspective. Similarly, if you're selling into an area that is very vertical, for example, if you're selling into the legal industry, you're only selling to law firms. Again, not an area that we can help you with post-investment. So within B2B, the way we segment the market is, we will look at companies that are solving broad horizontal problems for mid-market to enterprise companies. Those are areas where our enterprise go-to-market as Microsoft is the strongest. So post-investment, we can leverage that advantage on behalf of our portfolio companies. Over the last 4 years, we have done that repeatedly now. So we have a pretty good idea of the kinds of companies we can help post-investment. So that's, again, not telling you what to do, but just telling you what kind of companies we invest in where we can help. Has to be mid-market to enterprise, has to be fairly broad. When I say broad, it means cuts across manufacturing, retail, financial services, all the big verticals that Microsoft serves and has good motion, both from an engineering and product perspective, but also from a go-to-market and sales perspective.
Okay, so in that sense, you are different from a traditional VC in the sense that that you choose only those areas which are sort of aligned strategically from the areas that Microsoft itself chooses to operate in. I
think there's a little bit of difference. It is not necessarily to say that it's strategically aligned with Microsoft. It is, we do investments where Microsoft is not thinking of that. That's the whole point of having a venture group that looks at early stage startups, brings signals of where innovation is happening, not only in the Valley, but across the globe. We operate in Israel, we operate in London, we operate in India, we've got investments in Australia. So we are trying to tap into signals of where there will be investments and innovation across the globe in areas that Microsoft is not in today. But we have to have a way of pointing out that at some point in time when the company is scaled up from a Series A to a Series B or a Series C, we can apply Microsoft research to help them. We don't have to have that from day one. That's why we're not looking at a strategic filter. We are looking at a filter of, at some point in time when the company grows up, can we help with Microsoft resources? Look, if we cannot help with Microsoft resources, at least pre-COVID, there was a lot of money for enterprise startups. So why would you take money from M12 versus taking money from somebody else? That is a core differentiation. And we don't say that, we sort of act on that. We will really help companies, but we can only do that if we are good at picking those where we can help. So it's different than a strategic lens. It's a strategic in the sense of Microsoft is strategic to the company versus the other way around.
Okay, we have a question you see from BJ Arun, our Thai president. So BJ, please go.
Hi, Nagraj. Great to have you on the show. I was wondering how M12 gets its deal flow. How do entrepreneurs pitch their programs, their opportunities to you? What typically is your deal flow?
Yeah, I think great question. So BJ, the deal flow we have is, from a sourcing perspective, is almost no different than financial VCs. We get referrals from VCs we worked with in the past who had success working with us. We have entrepreneurs who are coming to us either through prior relationships with our team. Our team is comprised entirely of people who worked in the investment community outside of Microsoft. So we have a very externally focused team that came from VCs, came from CVCs, and they have their own networks, just like VCs have. So it's, from a deal flow perspective, I would say it's no different from where financial VC gets the deal flow from.
Thank you.
So, another question that's come from one participant, Yogesh Pandit, I guess he cannot ask it himself. His question is, so what are the top 3 reasons, assuming that the area of focus is aligned with Microsoft, what are the top 3 reasons that you would look for in a startup to invest?
Let me rephrase the question. So you're saying, assuming the company is operating in the enterprise space,
yes,
and serving the mid-market to enterprise,
right.
It's a B2B startup software, what
Right.
make us invest? Well, I think we invest primarily.
So what are the top 3 things that you would look for in the startup, assuming all the other things are aligned?
Yeah, so I think like any partnership, we have about 9 folks in the firm that at a variety of times can cut checks. Each of them have individual areas of interest. What interests me generally is different from what interests somebody else. If you were to ask me in the kinds of investments I've made investments in areas which in some way or form touch consumers, not through the directly, but from a B2B2C perspective. I'm personally excited about companies that sell into enterprises, but have a value proposition that resonates with employees within the enterprise. So it has both the bottoms up and top down motion associated with it. 2 good examples of companies in that category that I invested in. One you mentioned was Livongo, which is sort of an area where employees are very engaged. They want to manage their own health. It's offered as a benefit to employers. It is technically a healthcare company, but really, if you think about Livongo, it's an enterprise SaaS company because it sells on a per employee per month model. Similarly, I'm the board and I've invested in a company called Go1, and Go1 can be viewed as the Spotify of corporate learning. Corporate learning itself has a number of companies in it, but what Go1 has managed to do is reach the hearts and minds of employees by offering them not only required training, but if somebody, an employee base, wants to have a personal development and learn photography, they can do the same. They can learn photography at the same time they're doing compliance training for GDPR, and there's no extra cost to the employer because it's sold as a package, just like Spotify would sell you a package of music that you can choose from. So that's more, I would say, personal. If you ask my partners in Israel, I think you have a question of that later on. Many of them will invest in cybersecurity because that's where they come from. They also have a unique advantage being in Israel and having a good deal flow on cybersecurity from. We have partners that are really interested in cloud infrastructure that they would then invest in areas of cloud infrastructure. We have partners who invest in the Marcom stack, in the sales enablement stack. We have companies like Outreach in the portfolio that have done really well. So it's really hard to answer the question because it just depends, just like any other VC partnership, on the specific partner who's going after deals and what their knowledge base is, what their interest level is. But suffice to say, within an enterprise scenario, we are very broad. We have companies all the way from cyber, like we talked about, to like the Go One example, where it's very much an employee engagement tool, and everything in between.
That's interesting. You said about Livongo, so there is a question on that. Is Deepti Desai ready to go? Deepti?
Yeah. Hi. Hi, Kashyap. So Venk mentioned that you've invested in Livongo. Another of your portfolio companies is Innovator, a cross-border healthcare company. So what is your decision-making process to invest in healthcare companies? What do you look for, and how is the investment in that sector different from your other sectors? And I have a follow-up second question. Innovator is a cross-border company. So what made you enter the Indian startup ecosystem where there's so many startups? How do you find those that can scale and grow globally?
Sure, thanks, Deepti. So addressing the Livongo and the Innovator question in general, if you think of what I said earlier and the principles we invest in healthcare IT. So when I say healthcare IT, which means there should be no regulatory risk, we are not a team that understands regulatory risk. So if it requires FDA approval, then we will not invest in it. If it involves new pharma cures, I mean, that is not an area of expertise that we have in the team. With both Livongo and Innovator, while they operate in the healthcare space, they can be viewed as enterprise SaaS companies. They sell software as a service. They sell into big enterprises. Livongo had Microsoft as a customer post-investment. Innovator sells into large payers, large providers, but it's software. It has nothing to do with regulatory. It's not a new drug. And again, those are all great areas for investment. We are not good investors in those areas because A, we don't understand the spaces. B, we cannot help them post-investment. With both Livongo and Innovator, we are able to help them very much because it looks like an enterprise SaaS company without the regulatory hurdles that other healthcare firms might go through, other startups might go through. We are not good healthcare investors when there's regulation involved. Your second question on cross-border investments. So Innovator is actually not our first cross-border investment. Our first cross-border investment is a company called Netrodyne. We have invested in Netrodyne, we invested in Innovator. Our most recent investment in the space, the cross-border, as you call it, is a company called FarEye. All three of them have very similar characteristics, which is, if you look at their R&D, the R&D primarily has started in India, and that is no different than how companies in Israel are born. They started R&D in Israel. But if you look at the markets for Innovator or Netrodyne or for FarEye, they're primarily Western, which is Western Europe, the US, areas where we can help them with go-to-market. So that is still the same case. It is just because the company was born in India, we are not investing in companies that serve the Indian market today, because again, we are looking at unfair advantages we can give a company. And right now, we are not able to give any kind of specific advantage from a company that sells into a consumer market in India. So we pick companies which are very strong engineering-backed companies, but are selling into markets primarily outside India. Netrodyne sells into the US. That's about, obviously almost 100% of their market. Same with Innovator. FarEye is a little bit more distributed, but again, the go-to-market is primarily outside of India, and it's an enterprise sale.
So Nagraj, there are a number of questions on what stage do you invest in? So if you could clarify that.
Yeah, we lead investments in the Series A and Series B stage. When we started 4 years back, we were a little bit more flexible on the stage. We used to invest in Series C companies as well. We have invested, I think, very opportunistically in the D as well. But in the last 18 months or so, we have really focused on leading Series A and Series B investments.
So, so there's no revenue as such a threshold, but any company that's ready for Series A.
Yeah, I mean, I think the revenue threshold in an enterprise SaaS company at the Series A is, I would say, some sort of product market fit, which means 500K to $1 million in ARR. That's generally where we have seen companies that we've invested in fall into. There's exceptions, but that's sort of the what we look for.
Okay. There's a question from Kanchan from Bangalore. Kanchan, please go.
Hi, Kanchan, I think you're on mute.
Okay, she's not ready. There's another question from Brigand, and Brigand says, "Are you writing checks in this environment? If so, what are the metrics that you look for? How are they different today than pre-COVID days?"
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is a question that a lot of founders have. So let me say that every VC is going to be different during these times. The way we approach it is nothing is fundamentally changed. We have access to capital. We are active. We are investing. How we are investing is the following. Given when COVID hit, we have obviously spent a fair bit of time making sure our existing portfolio was well taken care of. What that meant was essentially for us and many VCs, instead of a board meeting every quarter, every day was a board meeting. So we were making sure that the companies we had already funded in the portfolio had enough cash reserves to last through, how much of our time this crisis takes. For us, it's 18 to 24 months of cash is what we are advising our companies. Second order of business was we had a pretty good pipeline of companies we had already met multiple times that we had courted and we were talking to, had done some amount of pre-diligence before COVID hit. And we have continued that work and we have closed one deal and we have 2 term sheets out for companies that we had met pre-COVID. I think the question in everybody's mind is what happens to companies that are net new, companies we have not met pre-COVID physically in person. The answer there is we have no crystal ball on when we can all return to work. Having said that, we are having meetings or video with net new founders at this point in time. We are understanding their business in the same way we would do in a meeting. What we haven't done so far is we haven't come to the point of cutting a check on a net new company we met post-COVID. But again, think of that as March timeframe. It's just end of April. It takes time to get to know the company, get to know founders. So we are doing some of that work through video. What we hope to do is once we are able to do things a little bit more in an office setting, to pick a few of those companies that we've been meeting and understanding the business, have got comfortable with, to actually have some face-to-face meetings and then hopefully close the deal. Now, I have no idea what happens if we're not able to meet anybody till October. Maybe things will change and we'll cut checks without meeting anybody. But so far, the plan of action has been taking care of portfolio and closing deals we met founders pre-COVID, which we've been doing. We've been very active. You'll hopefully have seen some announcements from our side in terms of new deals. You'll see a few more coming up in the next 2 weeks as well.
Yeah, okay. So another question here is, what are, according to your investment team, what are the 3 hottest enterprise technology areas going to be in next 3 to 5 years? These are, there are a lot of entrepreneurs here in the audience and they want to figure out to see what it is that you think is hot.
Well, the thing is, VCs might tell you what they think is hot. Actually, the entrepreneurs know what is hot. We just follow the trend many times. But having said that, from a tailwind perspective, we are looking at what impact COVID has had in the current portfolio. And what we're seeing clearly is companies that benefit from the work from home trend. Some of it is not going to change post-COVID. I think some of these behavior changes we are seeing in terms of work from home will continue. I gave the example of this company Go1, which is in the online learning space. Their traffic has literally gone 3x in less than 3 weeks. And while there may be some fall back to the normal post-COVID, I don't think they'll go back to what they were there pre-COVID, because people are used to now the idea that there's you can work from home pretty productively. And when you have time, you can learn. And so this is an example of a company that will hopefully have secular tailwinds going into 2021 and beyond. Similarly in healthcare, I think this is well documented, but telehealth has been such a huge issue in terms of reimbursements across the globe. My wife is a physician. She also happens to be a great stylist, which I found out through that's why I have a haircut which doesn't look like it's very bad. But if you ask her, even 6 months back, she would say telehealth sucks. We don't get reimbursement in the same way. COVID has changed all of that. Within 3 years of regulatory changes have happened in the last whatever month or so. So clearly the movement towards telehealth is not going to stop post-COVID. That area has got secular tailwinds. Innovaccer is a great example of that company where they're seeing a lot of tailwinds on the healthcare side, because the digitization of healthcare is going to continue very strongly. You're seeing the stock price of Livongo, it's gone up because, again, they're playing into the same market. So these are very secular tailwinds of companies where I think they will benefit well into the next 2 years. We have a company in the, I would say, grocery marketplace. This is a company that discovers new brands for grocery retailers and basically allows emerging brands that I and probably Venk are not very familiar with in terms of being organic and healthy for us, that are essentially very hard to find in a grocery store. That company has one of the strongest March and Aprils in their history, and you'd have thought that, wow, what happened there? Again, folks who have gone into online grocery in this crisis, not all of them are going to go back and say, I'm going to physically shop, because they've realized how convenient that is. FarEye, which is a company I mentioned in India, is a logistics software provider. They're seeing increases in their business from last mile delivery companies that are saying, wow, I need to optimize my last mile because my demand, I've never seen demand like this. So I think the way to work backwards is to look at macro trends where there's secular tailwinds because of COVID and see which companies are going to not only survive, but thrive. And we have a number of them in the portfolio. But having said that, having gone through 09, 010, net new businesses that nobody had thought of are going to be born during this crisis. And I would say no VC can predict that. Only you as founders can make that happen.
That's a very interesting answer. But from your, in general, is there a sort of an in-house wisdom on what are the areas, for instance, Microsoft is pretty big in cloud. So just from the cloud standpoint, are there any such big mega trends that you see that could be lucrative in the next 2-3 years?
One of the biggest mega trends we are seeing, and I think this is fairly public, is the acceleration of the cloud is happening faster. It's companies is in this point saying, why would I buy more on-prem equipment at this point in time? So there's a lot of things happening which are positive from a cloud migration. So the speed of cloud migration, just like I mentioned in telehealth, or things like remote learning, remote video conferencing, all of that are just accelerating at a pace we haven't seen. I think our CEO is on record, saying the digital transformation is happening at a record pace because everybody is sort of realizing how fast these things will move and why going to the cloud is a big trend. One of the other areas I think we are pretty bullish on is automation. And when I say automation, it is I think robotics is somewhat similar to health, where there's been slow adoption. But post-COVID, in factories where you can get robots to work without having to visit the factory, if we had that tech today, a lot of these factories would still be in operation. So I think we are seeing secular trends like that, where we are monitoring and we are going to make, I would say, significant bets in these areas. But again, as I said, there's not saying that there's net new businesses that I haven't heard of, that I don't know and I can't predict, that won't come up. And we'll definitely jump on those as well.
So let's see. Is Joe Zhao ready for the question? And after Joe, it's Vish Mishra.
Thank you for your time. So we've invested in a few deals where we saw Salesforce, Amazon. I'm just curious, how is your team's go-to-market approach different from kind of your closest competitors, corporate venture capital arms?
Yeah, I think the way I answer those questions is I think Salesforce and Amazon are very good companies. They're well-run companies. I think it's clear they're good competitors to us. I don't have any proprietary knowledge on how Salesforce or Amazon does go to market. The reason I mentioned as to why we focus on enterprises, Microsoft has a very, very long heritage of partnering with ISVs to go to market. I think the way to think about M12 investments are, they're also ISVs. They just happen to be smaller startups that have significant innovation in areas where maybe our traditional ISV customers don't have that. Our traditional ISV customers are great partners. They've been through with us. So we have a very established enterprise go-to-market motion that has existed pre-M12. It's not like M12 came and created that. We are taking advantage of that. I'm sure Amazon and Salesforce have similar strategies, and companies should figure out, as I said, what corporate can help them better post-investment. We have personally at M12 invested with Amazon, we've invested with Salesforce. We have had no issues investing with either of them, and we are good partners in the VC ecosystem.
Okay, Vish Mishra. Nihar, why don't you ask for Vish?
Sure. Hey, Vish, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Nagraj, first and foremost, congratulations, wonderful job. And we are just glad to have you. And even better that, Venk launched this inaugural program, this program, and you are the inaugural speaker. So even much better. So here's the question: since you are on NVCA board and all that stuff, as you know, all the VC have gone through their portfolio adjustments, and the current number, even NVCA published more than 300 companies, startups, have let more than 30,000 people go in the U.S. and entrepreneurs are struggling. So what is, what's your advice to them? How do they, because they can't raise the next round, they can't find the next customer. And so this is a very timely advice that I think they need from someone like you. So if you can share your wisdom as to what can they do right now, and they know, and at least no one sees any end to this economic slump right now. Okay, through during COVID. So please, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Vish. I'll try to answer as best as I can. I don't have a crystal ball. If I had, I'd invest in the public stock market. But I'll tell you that. I can only tell you from the lens of what our portfolio is doing. I mean, you're right. There is a number of companies that are laying off right now. I think Airbnb announced I think today as well. Again, when I went through the sectors we invest in, look, our companies are also facing headwinds in terms of being able to sell, because enterprise customers also, it's not like all enterprise customers are buying at the same rate they were buying pre-COVID. Having said that, we don't have exposure to sectors like travel, hospitality, sort of more consumer-oriented sectors. So we are not seeing the same impact on our portfolio companies. But our portfolio companies are also very self-aware. They understand that they also don't know when this will end, and they're preparing to essentially make sure they survive and they thrive through this crisis. So there's both defense and offense. In terms of what they're doing, there's a class of companies that have sort of come through plans and have decided that they can get through operational cost reductions by salary cuts. And that starts at the top. Many of our CEOs who are first-time entrepreneurs have been very self-aware. They have taken the lead. They have cut their salaries the most, and they have asked everybody else in the company to follow, not at the same rate, but at a smaller pace, so that they can preserve overall headcount and while sort of delivering to the board's request to making sure they have cash runway to survive the crisis. So that's one approach. The other approach is obviously having to go through the painful part of letting go of people, which is never easy for a startup founder, given that they have put their hearts and minds in building a company. To see that happen, he or she is going to have a lot of angst before taking that step. In some cases, that step is necessary. I think the only advice that we are giving to our portfolio is take your time, come up with a plan, and do it once. Anytime you do any kinds of reduction, it is a very big distraction, very painful for the employees to let go, also painful for the org itself. If you do it multiple times, it will really derail your business. So there is no need to rush on these. We are trying to give the entrepreneurs and founders in our portfolio the time it takes to come up with plans, discuss with the board, but then do the replanning once. Replanning every month is definitely a kiss of death for startups. So do it the right way if you have to. That is usually the last resort, at least in our portfolio. We have seen many companies being able to do this replanning with even taking out things like travel. I mean, already none of us can travel even if you want to. That is for many of our startups that are selling all across the globe, a big part of expenses. Take the ones that are very obvious, consolidate tools. We had a number of companies that are scaled up that grew so fast, they did not know what kind of tools every part of the company was using. Just by doing an audit of, let's make sure we're not basically doing wasteful spending on multiple tools and standardize on one set of tools. That's the second category. Third category is, just basically, as I said, salary cuts. And then, of course, if need be, if none of those work with the operational plan that you need to go past 18, 24 months, then you have to sort of consider the last and most painful step of layoffs. Again, do that once. Don't keep coming back to the well and saying, I have to do one more round in 3 months or 6 months. It is very disruptive, and it will make sure that you will not succeed.
Okay, Kanchan from Bangalore, please.
Good morning, Venk sir. Good morning, Nagraj. I'm Kanchan, part of TIE Bangalore and founder of Loan Genie, which is a lending fintech, lending to millennial employees as well as lower income segment employees. Our focus is a lot on artificial intelligence, blockchain, as well as machine learning. I just wanted to understand how can Microsoft, support as far as like a AI focused startup, and also with a heavy focus on mobile.
Yeah, Kanchan, that's great questions. First of all, congratulations for starting a company that is trying to get financial inclusion. It's a very worthwhile cause, especially in a country like India. So kudos to you for doing that. Microsoft is obviously a very large company. We have a number of efforts that are focused towards startups. What you're hearing from is one very small piece of the effort towards startups. M12 is the equity arm. We are a small operation, and we can do only so much. And as I mentioned, our focus is very much not on the B2C segment. Having said that, in India, we have a very strong presence for Microsoft for startups. If you want to get in touch with them, I'm happy to have somebody from there either contact you or pass on your name to them. They are there to support startups that are sort of using, as you said, AI, building on cloud, and they're ready to provide resources for companies that are all across spectrum. They're not necessarily limited to the kinds of companies we are limited to from our purview.
Okay, so looks like on FinTech, there's another question from Inspirev. Is Inspirev ready to ask the question?
You'll have to unmute yourself, Inspirev.
Okay, am I audible now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Venk, thank you for having us. It's been a while since we connected in the Bay Area. Would love to be back when things get back closer. We're actually very excited to be part of the Microsoft for Startups program, Nagraj. You haven't paid for this infomercial, but I think in the era of techlash, I am personally impressed by the work that Microsoft is doing, evident in even the book your president published on tools versus weapons, on how, now more than ever, we need to think about the positive societal impact of technology. And at Inspire, we're doing precisely that. We're very excited to now have issued patents around our technology with scope across both sides of the Atlantic. Looking at empowering consumers when they make bigger purchases rather
than... What's the question? What's the question?
Yes. Yeah, I guess the question was, how do we get on the, from the Microsoft for Startups program, how do we get on the M12 radar?
Yeah, I think the good news is you're on the M12 radar by being on the call here. I think the maybe not so good news, as I mentioned, is we are really not great investors when it comes to reaching consumers. Again, every venture firm has to have some level of focus. We have decided to focus on a specific area, as I mentioned. It is very easy to have scope creep, have focus creep, have geography creep, and do everything badly. We are trying to do what we do really well. So I again appreciate what you're doing, and I'm actually at least very thankful that you've been able to get some help from the Microsoft for Startups program. It is currently not an area of active investment for us. Again, it's one of those things which I said, we are just not good investors for companies that are going after consumers. We are not able to help you either from a board perspective or from a post-investment perspective. So it's going to be hard for us to dedicate time, energy, and money to areas where we are just not the best investor for you.
So just to be clear, we are actually B2B2C, and the program is offered through partnering retailers. We've had affiliate partnerships.
Then please apply. We have our website where we have an easy application process. If you're B2B2C, which is perfectly fine, I think we'll absolutely take a look.
All right. We have a question about angels and all those things. So Vijay Kotrappa, if he's not ready, then Nihar, you please ask for him.
Sure. So I can ask the question. The question from Vijay is, how can we as an angel fund or individual investor invest alongside M12?
That's a great question. I would like to invest alongside M12 as well. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to do that. And we don't have any mechanism to allow other funds or other angels to invest at all. We are trying to make this as free of conflict of interest as possible and make it purely financial. So right now, unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you. Thank you. Thank you for the support, though.
Okay. So let's see. I have some question. I think there was some conversation about AI, and that's the question that I wanted to ask actually. Companies like Microsoft have all the resources. They have massive advantage in data. They have massive advantage in compute infrastructure. They have massive advantage in access to talent. What can a startup do in AI that that could be worthwhile?
Yeah, I think let's step back on AI. I think if you look 4 years back, there was, I think 4 or 3 years back, a massive wave of companies that said we are doing AI. Fast forward now, everybody's saying that's good. You're doing AI or machine learning. What is the ROI? What is the specific problem you're solving? If you're not solving a specific problem, if you want to be a think tank, I would say it's very hard to compete against not only just Microsoft, but Google, as you said, or Amazon, because there's, from a research perspective, we have a lot of resources. But the superpower for founders or entrepreneurs has always been find a specific problem, apply the technology to it, and sort of go to market. If AI happens to be the best way to solve that problem, then you still have an edge, because despite our vast resources at Microsoft, we are never going to be able to do everything we want to do. Our roadmap is going to be prioritized with the highest impact things for Microsoft. And you have to find a wedge to figure out, this is a problem that can be best solved by AI ML, and I'm going to go solve it. I mean, we had a pitch in the morning, and yes, we are still taking pitches from a company where half the group said, hey, Cisco can do this. My point was, of course, Cisco can do this, and Cisco can do 50 other things, just like Microsoft can do it, but they're not doing it. Just that fact that theoretically we can do it versus the sort of complete focus that a founder and a founding team can bring to a specific problem, because they've had a pain point, they've identified a gap in the market, and they put 100% of the resources into that particular area, and they outrun the incumbents, such that whether it's a Cisco or a Microsoft or whoever it is, they have to buy that company. That is sort of the playbook. That is the playbook in the Valley. It's a playbook across the globe. I think it's no different in AI. Now, if you're trying to do research in AI without a specific problem, and you build this large team of researchers, that I question. I think, Venk, you're right about that, in the sense that's a hard thing to say, that I have this team of 50 people that are AI machine learning experts, and we can do anything. That is, if you say we can do anything without actually having a problem to solve, then we can do that better, I think, at Microsoft. But if you find a specific problem and you go hard at it, I think you have a good shot, just like anything else.
So basically, AI applied to particular application areas.
Yeah, you solve a particular business problem. I mean, we funded a company in contract management that is taking a ton of contracts that everybody has, from procurement to legal, and using machine learning there to process it and basically be able to get all the key terms in those contracts surfaced. So somebody who's a procurement person can just look at and say, hey, this next 30 days, I have these 10 contracts expiring. I should either renew them. Here are the terms. that used to be a lot of manual work. Now, that is not AI for the sake of AI. That is solving a very specific business problem. It's a high ROI problem. And, the company, by the way, not that I'll name it, you can look it up, sold their first large contract to Microsoft. As you said, we are a big AI company. We bought tech from that company because they were solving a very specific problem. And they had very good domain knowledge. The founding team is ex-lawyers, and they knew what lawyers needed, and they knew, what contracts have. So they applied machine learning with a PhD from MIT, who is one of the founders, along with 2 lawyers. So they had the domain knowledge, they got very specific machine learning language knowledge, and they applied that to a very problem domain that had very high ROI.
Great. Okay, so next question is from Surya Challa. Surya, are you ready?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Venktesh. Thank you, Nagraj. This was very, very informational. We are Cloud Axle, a zero-code DevOps platform. We are in the beta stage. One of our beta customers, a paying customer, we help them grow their volume by 10 times the number of users. We handle their, they are an educational technology startup. With the recent COVID, their traffic went up by 300%. Our platform managed it very smoothly. And this is all on Azure. They were on AWS 2 years ago. We migrated them into Azure. We set them up. They spent 0 time on DevOps. Our platform takes care of the whole thing. So my question is, we are in the beta stage. We're still building a platform, very innovative approach, very different, but we are in the beta stage. At our stage, how could we take help from M12 and Microsoft?
I think at the beta stage, we are not seed investors. We leave that to folks who are better seed investors who can do hands-on work with companies like you, Surya. I think the space is right. We have got a number of companies in DevOps that we have funded. We are very bullish on the space itself. I don't know how to answer the question besides saying that, I think in the areas where we have Microsoft startups, obviously you can take help from there. At M12, we'll be ready to take a look at it when the metrics are there and we are ready for a Series A. That's sort of the earliest we can take a look at. It is just, again, all comes down to focus for us. We just can't expand things to areas where we are not good at, or seed investments where we just don't have the bandwidth to do. We are set up as a fund, so we have sort of resources that are constrained to the fund size. So I think I don't have a great answer, except that the area itself is a very active area for us. We have, I think, depending on the definition, anywhere from 3 to 6 companies in the DevOps space.
Appreciate it. Is it possible to reach out to someone and get some feedback on our approach?
You can, as I said, we can through our website, you can definitely supply that, and we're happy to try to provide feedback. Again, we do receive a lot of inquiries, but I'm trying to make sure we can be respectful and see if we can provide some feedback.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, sir.
So, there are a number of questions on valuation. What are the metrics you use for deciding how do you value the companies that you invest in?
Yeah, I think the valuation question is interesting, especially post-COVID. We have seen, in generally speaking, I would say anywhere from 20 to 40% decrease in valuations post-COVID. It just depends on the sector you're in or what have you. Pre-COVID, sort of the way to think about valuations was at somewhere in the 10 to 15 times ARR range. A lot of Series B and Series C companies were getting done at that. Some were getting done at 20. Cybersecurity multiples had reached, I think, an all-time high of over 20 in terms of ARR. I'm saying that right now, a lot of those have reset. A number of the recent deals we have done are in more, if you look at, the Series A, the valuations are very much all across the board because you don't have that much revenue, and applying multiples to that is sort of not that meaningful. But I think the surveys that we have done from other VCs have shown that the Series A valuations are ranging, at least in the Valley, somewhere in the 15 to 30 pre-money range based on how, sort of technically hot the company is. At the later stages, I'm seeing the valuations contract in the sense of there's a 9 to 12, pretty tight range between 9 to 12, depending on growth and things like that we are seeing post-COVID. Everything has an exception. There is no such thing as, every company will fall into the bucket. But if you look at the vast majority of companies that are raising, that is what the valuations seem to have reset to on the SaaS side. Cyber, there's maybe a little bit of a premium, but again, not as much as it was pre-COVID.
Great. Okay. Is Raju ready with the question?
Yes, Venk. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. All right, Nagraj. Thanks for doing this call. My question was about M&A, and how active is Microsoft right now, and how have things changed in the COVID times, and specific areas that you guys might be focusing on for your M&A considerations.
So Raju, the reason I would say I've survived in big corporations for almost 20 years is because I try to speak to where I work and not speak for others in the company. So I would say I've got nothing to do with M&A in Microsoft. So it is really not my place to speak about M&A for Microsoft. It's sort of, again, whatever I say will have not much meaning because we are the investment arm. We don't get involved with M&A. I don't have visibility into how and what companies Microsoft is considering for M&A. Sort of we keep a very strong dividing line between our investments and M&A. So unfortunately, I want to stick to making sure I keep having a longer career in corporate and not answer that question. Venk, you're muted.
So one of the question was about your, Microsoft and in the automotive space. So the question there is, what's your perspective on all the transformation going on in the automotive industry, and is there any interest you see in investment in companies that are monetizing the automotive related data?
Yeah, I think, look, I think we spent almost 4 years looking at whether it's autonomous driving or the automotive space. In the end of the day, we had different views on when autonomous will happen versus a lot of the folks in the industry or other VCs. So we ended up not making large bets in the space. We have made 2 specific bets. Both are very thoughtful in how we look at automotive. This is, again, an M12 perspective, not a Microsoft perspective. At Microsoft, obviously, there is a lot of digital transformation happening with many automotive manufacturers. They're all moving to the cloud, and Microsoft is the center of a lot of those. I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking with the M12 perspective. We stayed away from basically doing any investments in autonomous vehicles, given what we thought was a time frame for when they will be adopted versus what the rest of the industry was saying. So our 2 investments are indicative of our thinking. One of the investments we have made is a company that provides simulation tools for automotive, for autonomous vehicles. And our thesis there is we don't know which ones will come out first, whether it's Waymo or one of their many competitors. But one thing they cannot do is basically test everything physically on all the roads and all the conditions. What they will need is to do very good simulation environments, and that is irrespective of one company or the other. Every company needs to make sure these vehicles are going to be very safe before they put on the road. And there is no way to physically test every combination with pedestrians and everything else. So we've invested in a company that provides the simulation capabilities for the whole industry. So it's like a indirect bet on autonomous vehicles. And I think that's turning out to be the right bet from our perspective, because they're selling into every big autonomous vehicle provider. Everybody needs simulation. Everybody needs the vehicles to be safe. The other bet we made was in a company called Netrodyne, which I mentioned earlier, which is a cross-border India deal. They're providing driver safety solutions for fleets. As a result of that, they've got many, many trucks that they have their hardware and software on that are traversing millions of miles every day on US roads. Guess what that gives them? That gives them great ability to build up HD maps, not only HD maps, but even regular maps as a side benefit of what they're doing. And they have one of the best performing HD maps that is not even their core business today. So those are some of the indirect bets we made in the auto sector. We've been very careful, and we've been sort of very a little bit circumspect on when some of these things will come to bear. So we made bets that I think align with the worldview.
Okay. So, there's one question you see here coming from the audience, and then I have one question and then we'll wrap it up. So the question from the audience is, how do you approach an investment in startups that have competing or overlapping offerings as Microsoft?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Venk. I think if you had asked me that question 4 years back, I would say that we would absolutely make that investment because our charter is to make financial returns. And if a company is competitor to Microsoft, but we believe as M12 that they have a good shot of being a good financially independent company, then we would invest. And we did a few investments when we first started. I think if you ask me that question today, I would say that we would be more careful in that space. And it's only because of this. It becomes harder to add value to a company post-investment if it is directly compared with Microsoft. Not that we can't make the investment, but our value add is diminished. And I'm looking for a set of founders who will take reference calls on my behalf and speak with other founders as to why they had such a great experience with M12. And if a company is directly competitive, yes, maybe I can make money out of that. It's a great investment, but I won't get a founder to say this post-investment M12 is very helpful because my hands will be somewhat tied by what I can get Microsoft to help them with. So I think today we are very, very careful when we evaluate companies like that, and we are pretty upfront in saying, don't tell us anything that you don't want M12 to say. We don't sign NDAs, but we also don't pass information back to Microsoft.
Okay, great. All right. So I have one final question before we wrap it up. You invest globally, and so Israel is known for security kind of related startups. Do you have a similar kind of perspective on other hotbeds of innovation? What are the global hotbeds of innovation, by the way?
Well, I'm biased. So I think innovation, I always have said this is much beyond the valley, but I think we have picked spots, and that may be indicative of where we believe there's good opportunities to invest. So obviously we have about 70% of investments in the team in the US, which covers Canada as well. We see lots of good opportunities in Canada, both from a primary investment plus engineering, sort of second engineering shops for our existing portfolio companies. We invest heavily in Israel, and then I think selectively in Europe. I think UK and Germany have tended to be our largest investor bases in Europe. And then you mentioned sort of globally, India and Australia turns out have good enterprise tech. Again, we are looking for enterprise tech. Some of it is obviously cyber, which, as you mentioned correctly, Israel is a hotbed of. We also have the greatest number of companies in our portfolio that are cyber related that come from Israel. So I think that matches with what you're saying. After that, though, I don't see a specific pattern. I mean, we are looking for deep enterprise tech in all these regions I mentioned. We are finding good enterprise tech entrepreneurs. So except for that one area, I mean, but to be fair, we also have cyber companies in the US. It's not like we don't have cyber companies in the US. We do have a larger proportion from Israel, but everywhere else, I think the enterprise tech seems to be well developed and really well placed. So we are trying to invest areas where we think there's a deep enterprise tech bench.
Great. Now my final question, any tip for the entrepreneurs?
I think the tips from me is going to sound hollow. I have a much easier job than you have. You're actually starting companies, raising money, and sort of juggling many different hats. I'm just looking at companies and making imperfect bets on one or the other. Having said that, from my experience, these are generally tough times for founders. All I can say is, as I said earlier, some of the best companies will be formed during the next 18 months. Try to be the founder that forms one of those best companies in this hard time. You will be massively rewarded when we all come out of it, and we will come out of it. There is no doubt we'll come out of it. I cannot predict the time, but we will come out of it. But the ideas that you put to bear right now, and when you persevere and make to do with even less than you had pre-COVID, I think you'll be rewarded outside when we get on the other side. So I would just say, be more careful with cash, like very simple advice, but don't lose hope, because I think that is the one thing none of us can lose hope or faith in. I think the innovation ecosystem will pull through really well. We're all here because we believe that innovation is the driver for many great economies in the world. And I think you guys are sort of the heart of it. As I said, we just provide you capital, and we are imperfect at doing that as well.
This is great. I think on that note, I think, Nagraj, I really want to thank you on behalf of the entire TAG community for taking this time, and giving thoughtful answers to all the questions. So really, really appreciate it. And if it was a live audience, we would have given you a big applause.
No, thank you so much, Venk. I appreciate it. I think for future ones, you should have a laugh track here, or like we had the old sitcoms. So I think that's what you need to add to these virtual calls. But I appreciate all the questions, and I know that I didn't answer all your questions fully, but that is the best I can do. And I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you. Thanks, Nagraj.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.